So what's really in a name? It seems so personal, doesn't it? Just a choice parents make. But what if that choice, when you look at millions of them, tells a much bigger story? A story about whole communities, maybe their values, perhaps even their politics.
That's precisely it. Today we're taking this fascinating deep dive. We're looking at how something as personal as a baby name really works as a kind of, well, a linguistic fingerprint for the communities using them.
A linguistic fingerprint. I like that.
Right. And our mission is to pull out the most surprising insights,
Yep.
those aha moments from the data, to really uncover those underlying cultural aspirations and maybe even shifts that are happening.
Okay, so let's dig in. So, the source material here. It's a really interesting mix, right? We've got Social Security Administration data that's the baby names,
The official lists.
paired with county-level results from the 2020 presidential election,
Right.
basically mapping names onto, well, red and blue America.
Exactly. The folks at Nameberry did this analysis. They took all that SSA data, linked it to the county election results from 2020, and then grouped states based on who won them, President Biden or former President Trump. So when we talk about a bluest name,
Right.
it means that name pops up way more often, relatively speaking, in states that leaned Democratic.
And reddest is the opposite, much more common in states that went Republican.
Precisely.
And this is key, I think. It's not about which names are number one overall, right? It's about relative frequency.
Absolute crucial. You mentioned Moshe earlier. It's 97% more likely in a blue state.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean it's, the most popular name everywhere.
Mhm.
It's just that much more concentrated in blue states compared to red ones. It's that proportional lean that tells the real cultural story here.
Got it. Those subtle differences add up.
They really do.
Okay, so let's start with the boys' names. As you looked at this data, comparing red versus blue, what patterns just sort of jumped out?
Well, for boys, what's really striking on the blue side is how quickly you see distinct ethnic and faith markers. Names like Moshe, Muhammad, Yusuf, Ibrahim. They cluster pretty significantly in blue states, especially in those more urban, immigrant-heavy areas.
Yeah.
It clearly reflects, established Jewish and Muslim communities. Like you said, Moshe 97% blue, Muhammad is 79% blue. Big numbers.
That's a very clear demographic signal.
Yep.
So what about the red side for boys? Are we seeing a totally different kind of theme?
Oh, absolutely. A different flavor entirely. Red state favorites often include names like Gunner, it's 72% red.
Bummer. Okay.
Baylor, 71% red. Tripp. These names often carry this sort of frontier feel, or maybe an action-oriented vibe. They seem to resonate strongly with a more, perhaps, rural or rugged cultural identity.
Interesting. Very specific associations. Now, you mentioned something fascinating earlier about surnames. Cohen and Cohen. That one really caught my eye.
Yes. This one raises a really interesting point about spelling. Even tiny variations matter. So Cohen, the more common spelling, it actually leans slightly red, which is maybe surprising.
Right.
But then Cohen, K-O-H-E-N, the Hebrew variant, that's even redder, 72% red.
Wow, so the variation makes it lean more red.
Exactly. And it really underscores this trend, particularly strong in conservative areas, of adopting surnames as first names, even when the name itself has, deep religious roots.
That's a fascinating nuance. Okay, so boys' names show these pretty clear divides. What about girls? Is it a similar picture, or do the patterns diverge there?
We definitely see clear patterns for girls, too. But the sources of inspiration seem, well, a bit different. On the blue-leaning side, parents seem to gravitate towards names that feel more maybe multicultural or classic in a global sense.
Like what kind of names?
Think Fiona, that's 78% blue. Liana, 75% blue. Mira, also 75% blue. Names like Nina, Aisha, too. They have this kind of global classicism. They travel well across different languages, different cultures.
Okay, so an international flavor for blue states. What's the counterpoint on the reddest list for girls? What's the vibe there?
Oh, that list is really overflowing with what you might call invented modernity.
Invented modernity.
Yeah, like newly coined names or maybe traditional names with really creative respellings, especially names ending in Lee or Lynn. You see Hattie, which is 66% red, Oakleigh, 65% red, Oakleigh, 64% red.
Oakleigh. Lots of oaks.
Exactly. And Oakley, Gracelynn, Renly. It seems like a way for parents to maybe nod to tradition, but also signal, originality, a modern spin.
Interesting. That creativity is really focused. Were there other big themes besides that kind of modern twist on the red list for girls?
Definitely. Nature names are huge,
Hmm.
especially botanical ones. Oakley and all its variations, Oaklynn, Oakley, Oakley, they really dominate that red list for girls. It strongly mirrors that sort of outdoor rustic imagery that seems highly valued in many conservative communities.
Fascinating. Different inspirations altogether. So, if we sort of step back and compare the trends for boys versus girls across this red-blue divide, what are the key differences that stand out? How do they diverge?
Well, one really clear divergence is how strong the religious signal is. For boys' blue names, it's very pronounced, right?
Hmm.
Muhammad, Moshe, Ibrahim, explicit religious connections.
Very direct.
For girls, you do see some faith-coded names like Miriam or Miriam appearing on the blue side, but the gap between clearly sacred names and more secular inspirations feels, well, narrower than it is for boys.
Okay, so the religious marker is stronger for boys in blue states. And what about those creative spellings we talked about? The Lynn endings, is that happening for boys too?
That's another significant difference. It seems red state parents are much, much bolder with inventing or respelling girls' names.
Right.
Yeah, flipping vowels, doubling consonants, adding suffixes like Leon or Lee. It's very common for girls. Boys get some adventurous choices too, don't get me wrong. Names like Stetson or Briggs pop up on the red list. But the real spelling playground, it seems, is definitely centered on daughters in those regions.
Huh. That's a really specific insight. What about the broader cultural messages, like masculinity or femininity being signaled through these names?
That's quite distinct too. Names like Gunner, for example, have these obvious martial or maybe sporting overtones. It reflects a certain cultural script, maybe tying male identity to strength, action, that sort of thing.
Right.
The common counterparts for girls on the red list often involve gentler imagery,
Yeah.
like Oakley referencing nature, woodlands, or sailor, maybe evoking the sea. It's a pretty clear difference in how those cultural values get expressed through gendered naming conventions.
This whole deep dive is just uncovering layer after layer. It's really quite something. Okay, for everyone listening, let's maybe crystallize some of the absolute standout findings. We've pulled out 5 points from the study that were particularly, well, mind-blowing.
Right. First one, that incredible 69-point gap between Moshe and Cohen.
Yeah.
Moshe, 97% blue. Cohen, 72% red. Both come from the Hebrew word for priest. But just that one letter difference in spelling signals totally different cultural allegiances. It's a stark illustration of how much weight a subtle choice can carry.
It really makes you think about how these signals work. Does that point to a bigger principle here?
I think it does. It shows how even tiny tweaks in, say, spelling can become these really potent markers of group identity. It's fascinating. Second big finding, nature versus scripture. This contrast is so clear. Bluest boy names, heavily leaning towards the sacred religious text, reddest girl names, overwhelmingly skewing rustic botanical inspired by the landscape.
Wow.
The actual sources of inspiration split so cleanly, not just by party line, but by gender too.
One group looking up, maybe the other looking around. That's quite a divide. And then the power of just a few letters you mentioned with Oakley.
Exactly. That's the third point. Oakley's many lives. Just adding, dropping, or shuffling a couple letters in Oakley like Oaklynn, Oakley can swing the name's political leaning by 15 percentage points.
15 points just for fiddling with the ending.
It's remarkable. It shows how much cultural resonance these small variations can pack.
So subtle, yet so significant. Okay, what's number 4?
Number 4 highlights this major surname surge, especially for boys in red states. 8 out of the 10 reddest boy names actually started out as last names.
8 out of 10.
Yeah, that's an adoption rate 3 times higher than what you see on the blue list for boys.
Yeah.
It really points to this broader cultural embrace in conservative regions of using traditional surnames as fresh, new first names.
Interesting. And the last one connects us globally.
It does. Our fifth finding is about immigrant influence. You see Arabic origin names, Muhammad, Yusuf, Aisha, ranking among the very bluest names. It's powerful evidence of how migration patterns are actively reshaping the cultural landscape, especially in those big democratic-leaning metro areas. You can literally see global trends weaving into local identity through names.
Okay, so we see what the patterns are. They're pretty clear. But the big question is, why? What does this all mean? Why do these distinct naming universes emerge? What are the deeper currents driving these differences?
Well, the why seems to boil down to some pretty fundamental cultural and demographic forces. First, just basic demographics, right?
Hmm.
Blue states tend to have larger, more established immigrant populations, bigger urban centers. So you naturally get this richer mix, this tapestry, as you said, of global names flourishing there.
Okay, demographics make sense. And religion came up so strongly in the names themselves. I assume that's a major factor in the why as well.
Oh, absolutely. The religious landscape is key. Conservative regions generally have higher rates of, say, evangelical Protestantism. That tradition often fosters naming practices centered on virtues or maybe occupational names, like Gunner,
Right.
rather than drawing heavily on explicitly foreign religious figures or texts, which you see more with names like Mohammed or Moshe in blue areas.
And those creative spellings, the Oaklyns and Gracelynns, what's behind that drive for uniqueness within a traditional framework?
That touches on cultural individualism, I think. Modern conservative naming often seems to prize uniqueness, but uniqueness within familiar traditions. Hence the creative spellings, it's familiar but distinct.
Okay.
Whereas maybe liberal naming culture leans a bit more towards perceived authenticity or multicultural resonance, sometimes favoring those established global classics we talked about.
And surely media, pop culture, role models, that must play a role in what names catch on where.
For sure, you can imagine how that plays out. Perhaps parents in red states are drawing more naming inspiration from, say, country music stars, maybe Southern sports heroes,
Hmm.
while parents in blue states might encounter a wider range of international celebrities, maybe characters from global literature or film. If you connect that to the bigger picture, it's pretty clear how our daily exposure, the media we consume, the broader trends, they all shape our personal preferences, even for something like a name.
This deep dive has really shown, I think, that baby names, they're far from just whimsical choices, aren't they? They really are these profound linguistic fingerprints.
They absolutely are. The data paints a picture of two almost parallel naming universes coexisting. One feels quite cosmopolitan, that's often infused with diverse faiths, it looks globally. The other has this frontier flavor, it's creatively spelled and maybe more deeply steeped in a certain kind of Americana.
Yeah.
And these choices, they really do seem to echo those deeper divides we see in things like migration, media habits, and even basic cultural aspirations.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. A single name obviously doesn't determine anyone's destiny, but what story might your name whisper? What does it say about the hopes your parents had, or maybe the character of the place you call home? And what stories are the names all around you telling about our constantly shifting cultural landscape? Something to think about.